Hey guys, it's Paul and happy Valentine's Day. Welcome back to my channel. And for those who don't know, we are doing a Valencrime series this month. And we're going to talk about a case that has happened in the last few years, and it is very controversial. It is definitely a hard one to cover. There is multiple trigger warnings, so let's get to those. If you guys are affected about hearing about suicide or mental illness, please do not watch this video. This one is about somebody who coaxed someone into committing suicide and therefore is very hard to listen to, and honestly it was even hard to research. And as you can tell from the title, we are covering the case with Conrad Roy and Michelle Carter. We're going to start by talking about Conrad. His name was Conrad Henry Roy III. He was born September 12th, 1995 and was 18 at the time of most of this that we talk about. He lived in New Bedford, Massachusetts. He was the oldest child, and people did call him Coco as a nickname. He had two sisters, Morgan and Camden, and graduated in 2014 from high school with a 3.8 GPA, so he was actually really smart. He was also very athletic and played multiple sports, baseball and track being some of the major ones he did. He absolutely loved the Boston Red Sox, so he really enjoyed baseball probably the most. He had gotten a boating license and thought that he might join his grandpa in helping running their tugboat business. He was explained to be goofy but a bit of a troublemaker, but he always got away with whatever he got in trouble for. His parents did get divorced in 2011 and he took it really hard. This is one of the big things that we hear that he struggled with. It was very messy and he suffered abuse from both sides, physically from his dad and verbally from his mom. He is also known to have suffered social anxiety pretty terribly. He saw several therapists and psychologists through his teens, but nothing just seemed to work for him. He tried to drown himself from drinking too much water and had overdosed at 17 on Tylenol. And at this time, he was talking to a girl he met online. Only reason Conrad stayed alive. They quickly rushed him to the hospital and treated him accordingly. In the summer of 2014, Conrad was thought to be struggling the most he ever had. He completely internalized it though, and just learned to hide it really well. He had just gotten on new medicine, so people had believed that this might have something to do with why he was struggling so hard, because he just wasn't regulated on this medication yet. And at this time, he was seeing a cognitive behavioral therapist along with taking new medication. Now on to Michelle Carter. She was born August 11th, 1996. She was explained to be very kind, quiet, very smart, liked to make jokes, athletic, and actually had pretty good grades also. She was voted most likely to brighten your day, but was a little reserved. And one thing a lot of people said was that she required a lot of attention. It was really hard to be her friend. She was always so insecure about your friendship and how you thought of her, and this caused her to have trouble making and keeping friends. She used her mental illnesses for sympathy and how to grasp people's attention. She had an anxiety disorder and also suffered from anorexia at the age of 9, and this is how she started to attend counseling. And she was also thought to have suffered from self-harming. And as most people know, when you put two people that are suffering immensely with their mental illnesses, sometimes they just almost thrive off each other. So Conrad and Michelle met in Florida. This was when Michelle was 15 and Conrad was 16. They both were vacationing down there, and Conrad was visiting his aunt while Michelle was visiting her grandmother. And this is when they realized they lived in the same state, only about an hour in between each other. They ended up having an online relationship for about 2 years, but what's interesting is they only lived in an hour away from each other, but they actually only met maybe 2 or 3 times in real life. There was absolutely no photos with them together, and their whole relationship pretty much was just all over texting and calling. And it was very intense conversations. A lot about their mental illnesses where they're almost like trying to one-up each other. And Conrad would send pictures to Michelle of guns and a noose in a tree and just kind of really weird things like that. It's clear through these text messages that they truly bonded over their mental illness. Most of their conversations were based on depression, anxiety, and suicide. Most conversations were very deep and just very dark. And after talking for a while, Conrad finally did admit that he wanted to commit suicide. He claimed that he had planned on it and had been researching it, and claimed he knew exactly how he was going to do it. He was just waiting for a good time. And he had even suggested that they do it together. Michelle told him not to do it, saying that his family loved him and that he had a strong support system, and really tried to push him to get help. And this, you have to remember, is on top of her crippling mental illness. But Michelle never told anybody that Conrad was having these thoughts. Conrad had a video diary. It was very heavy topics and very emotional, and I'm pretty sure they're still up on YouTube.
This is Conrad Henry Roy III reporting about social anxiety. Social anxiety to me is the inability to function properly in a manner that you want to in social situations. And one of the things that I've realized is not all eyes are on you at all times. People don't necessarily judge you, particularly in a situation where you're not feeling very good about yourself. You're making mistakes. Like, people understand that you come across as awkward. They're not going to judge you and make fun of you. Like, that's just who you are. And the quicker you are to realize who you are, the better. The hardest thing for me is to be comfortable in my own skin. Now, I know. A lot of people tell me that I have a lot going for me. I have to be happy. Well, no, you don't have to be happy. Happiness comes from your conscious thoughts, but it's not real. I am who I am. Yes, I can develop as a person, be more fluent, articulate, passionate about who I am. Or I can just go home, sit in my basement, and just do nothing about it. Just sit in my sorrows, weep and cry over something that is in the past. Or I can just take it day by day, step by step. I mean, it's going to be difficult to accomplish, but I need to, for personal growth, accomplish this sense of self-pride in myself, because depression or it can mean you don't like yourself.
And another thing that was really interesting was his search history. There was cyanide, death by cop, and easy ways to find poison. And during the time that Conrad and Michelle were talking, she did end up going to a rehab in the beginning of 2014 for her reoccurring eating disorder. Michelle at this time did get on a new medication, and as most know that have tried medication for their mental illness, there is a time period that it really takes time for you to get used to it. You almost seem crazy for a few weeks, like that's how you feel about yourself, and you do end up acting a little bit out of character until you're used to it. It can really screw with your emotions. So July 12th, 2014, Conrad had spent the whole day at the beach with his family. They had gotten ice cream, and his family said that he was really positive that day. He did seem a little antisocial and was on his phone a lot, but that wasn't necessarily out of norms for him. And so around dinner time, he had told his family he wanted to go eat dinner at a friend's house. And that was the last time that his mom saw him. She waved him goodbye and thought he'd be back that night. It was very unusual he didn't come home. He was not that type of kid usually. So late that night, Conrad's sister did get a message from Michelle asking if she knew where Conrad was. Then Camden contacts their mom. And supposedly that friend he said he was going to go eat dinner with was another girl. So his mom said to just tell Michelle that Conrad was at his dad's because she didn't want Michelle to be upset he was going to hang out with another girl. The next day, Michelle texts Camden asking if their mom's mad at her, and she told her no, we're just looking for Conrad. And at 10:17, Michelle texted that she would help come look for Conrad. She was just waiting for her mom to get home to take her. And she just kept texting Camden over and over. And Camden was not really, if at all, texting Michelle back, but Michelle continued to text her. They called the police and let them know that Conrad was missing, but he was found at the Kmart parking lot in the front seat of his truck. His cell phone was next to him, and there was a water pump in the back seat. And the water pump was filling the car with carbon monoxide. The family was devastated. They couldn't believe that Conrad had went through with this. And according to everything at the scene, it's thought that Conrad got there around 6:30 p.m. and was gone by 7:30 to 8. The police informed the family of Conrad's passing, and this is when Conrad's family really started digging to figure out if there was any signs that they missed. And this is where they found like several letters that were addressed to different people, and one of them was addressed to Michelle. But the family had heard of Michelle, but really just didn't know who she was or anything about her. So it was a little weird that he would leave a note at the end of his life for her. But it did say, like, thank you for talking me down so many times, and just thanking her for being there when he was really low. So his mom was just really grateful he had this friend. And this is when Michelle started texting Conrad's mom, saying how sorry she was and how much Conrad meant to her, and to be strong because Conrad wouldn't want her sad. She apologized for not doing or being really enough to stop him, and was just really pushing for a relationship with Conrad's mom. I mean, consistently texting her. And this is when some red flags started to appear. The first one was at Conrad's funeral. Michelle inched her way up to stand with the grieving family of Conrad and was just making a huge scene, sobbing hysterically, acting just absolutely ridiculous. And people can be really upset and hysterical at funerals, but the family really explained that this one seemed like it was for the sole purpose of attention. And the second red flag came pretty soon after. Michelle was asking if she could have some things out of Conrad's room, and also asked if she could have some of his ashes, and was just really pushing to establish a relationship with Conrad's family. And Michelle's social media around Conrad's death was very bizarre. She was constantly tweeting Conrad in heaven and just trying to really look like she was the victim in all of this, which is just odd. And the third and final red flag, until the family realized there's something going on here, was an event called Homers for Conrad. It was an event that Michelle was setting up to hold, which did not include the family at all. She made a Facebook page for it, and it was a softball fundraiser for suicide prevention. When she first put it up on Facebook, she immediately messaged her friend and said, "Hey, I just put up the Homers for Conrad page, I'm like famous now. And this was the first sign of clear intention of her using his death as a way to be a victim again. And so Conrad's best friend Tom saw this, and he had never heard of Michelle. So he messaged her on Facebook asking who she was and why she was holding an event for Conrad, especially since it wasn't even in their hometown that Conrad lived. It was in Michelle's. So on August 26th is when Tom messaged Michelle, and he wanted the details of this event, and he wanted to make a Facebook page too. And she just told him, no, you can just share mine. And he explains that Conrad's friends and family, like he wanted it to be about them and them being involved. So then she asked, well, are you going to mention that I made this event and that I am putting it together? And so then he starts asking like, how long did you guys date? And she said, well, it was on and off for 3 years. He then asked again why it's in Plainsville. And she said, well, that's where I live. So then Tom is trying to explain to her, like, why don't you move it to our town where Conrad's from, and it can be about Conrad and not in a town that literally nobody knows who Conrad is. She just kept giving excuses on why she couldn't do that and why she wasn't gonna do that. So then he tells her, well, he's making his own Facebook page where all of Conrad's friends and all of Conrad's family can be involved in this event. And she was just obsessed with making sure he gave her credit. And this is when Conrad's friends and family really started to see that she was trying to make Conrad's death all about her. She was texting all her friends about it. And she was now using Conrad's suicide as a way to manipulate her friends and family into giving her attention for how much she's grieving over this. And she just honestly seemed delusional, and then became a huge advocate against suicide. So she was a little all over the place. It's like she had good intentions, but for whatever reason, just couldn't take herself out of the equation. So when all of this started happening, a detective contacted the family and decided the best thing he could probably do was go through Conrad's phone. So he worked to get a warrant for that. And when he went through Michelle and Conrad's conversations, it was shocking. Like I said earlier, at the beginning, she really tried to convince him not to commit suicide and really was advocating for him to seek mental help. But on July 1st, there was a massive shift on how she talked to him. Michelle continuously brought up his suicide to him. So they ended up going to Michelle's school, and the police explained to her that they saw your two text messages, and they explained that they knew she orchestrated his suicide. She had taught him how to do it and bullied him into doing it. And throughout the time texting, it was like she got aggravated when he was doing better. He would literally apologize if he didn't kill himself that day. She would say things like if he got better, he would forget about her. And at this point of them talking, Conrad really seemed like he was having second thoughts on suicide, but Michelle just pushed and persuaded him to do it. So we're going to back up to June 27th. Conrad had gotten on a site to meet people with mental illnesses and had told Michelle about a friend that he met on there. And then her response was not, oh my gosh, good for you. I'm glad you have someone else to talk to. I'm glad you have another outlet. It was her asking him if the new friend gave better advice than her. So then on June 20th, the friend he met online was giving him advice on how to commit suicide. So that's not great, but Michelle seemed to compete with this, trying to make better recommendations on how to kill himself. And around July 2nd is when she really started to tell Conrad that she agreed he should do it. And this is when she began to really persuade him into how to do it, when to do it, and really bullying him into it. 10 days before Conrad's death, Conrad was getting really nervous about his family missing him and how his family would feel if he committed suicide. He was expressing he was having major second thoughts, but she still persistently told him he should go ahead and kill himself. They'll be fine. They'll get over it. It'll be hard at first, but they will get over it. So a few days before Conrad's death, there was a suicide attempt. It was unsuccessful, and he tried to overdose on sleeping pills, but he had eventually decided not to go through with it. Michelle seemed very angry, texting him things like, "I knew you wouldn't try that hard. I feel like such an idiot." And Conrad asked her why she felt like an idiot. And she literally said, "You don't even do anything, and I pour my heart out thinking it'll be the last time I talk to you. I thought you really wanted to die, but apparently don't, and I feel played and just stupid. Are you kidding me?" Within the few days before Conrad's death, when he would say he was eventually going to commit suicide, she would just get super mad and try to pressure him to do it like that day. She texted him over 40 times asking him when he was going to do it over these few days. He'd make excuses on why he didn't want to, and she would just argue that you should. He was worried that someone would try to save him, and she said, "Well, you better do it." And she would tell him there's not a better time to do it, and he would ask, like, what if it didn't work? And she'd just research pretty flawless ways to commit suicide and send it to him, and tell him how to make sure he could successfully commit suicide. And she was the queen of using reverse psychology on Conrad. She even asked him to tag her in his very last tweet and asked him to write her a suicide letter. You know, the letter that his mom found for her. Disgusting. 2 days before Conrad's death, Michelle was texting her friend and a boy she liked. She was already telling them that Conrad was missing, and was already saying that his family had no idea where he was and that he was suicidal. So she was already expressing this to people before it even happened. And the day of Conrad's death, they woke up and started texting each other around 9 a.m. And Michelle continued to push him that whole day and how and when he was going to do it. But then there were text messages that were just like any normal person would text throughout the day. Conrad talked a lot about being hesitant, and she would just tell him that he was overthinking it and that he just needed to do it. And she would say things like, "If you want it so bad as you say you do, you'll do it today." And made Conrad promise he would commit suicide that day. And that's when they just started talking about where. Conrad's first plan was to use a generator, but that was quickly changed to a water pump. And around 5 p.m., Michelle asked Conrad if he was going to delete their text messages. And this is when he deleted all their text history. But, of course, the police can recover deleted text messages. He asked if she would continue messaging him and just asking him when he was going to do it. And just kept telling him, "You're procrastinating. Just do it. Just get it over with and do it." The generator did break down, which is why he had to switch to the water pump, because he could get one of those at work at the tugboat company. And around 8 p.m., Michelle had texted her friend Sam. If you remember, that is almost the exact time Conrad died. And she said, "Sam, he just called me, and there was a loud noise like a motor. I heard moaning like someone was in pain, and he wouldn't answer when I said his name. I stayed on the phone with him for 20 minutes. That's all I heard. I think he just killed himself." Literally got off the phone with Conrad, and instead of calling Conrad's family, instead of calling the police, instead of calling for help of any kind, she texts her friend about Conrad dying instead of seeking help for him, or at least trying. And that is when she also texted his sister Camden asking if she's heard from Conrad. You just texted your friend that he died, and now you're texting his sister? Like, do you know where he is? Do you know what's going on with Conrad? tasteless. So Michelle did text Sam, and it's thought that she knew her phone was being monitored at this time, so I'm not really sure why she did, but she did. And she ended up confessing to everything. She even confessed that Conrad had gotten out of the car at one point and explained that he was having second thoughts while they were on the phone, and he was just really scared and didn't want to go through with it. And she told him to get back in the car. Let me repeat that. She told him to get back in the car. She didn't call the police and didn't call his family. She told him to get back in the car, where she inevitably knew he was going to die if he got back in the car. And yes, Conrad was the one that ultimately made the decision to get back in the car, but there has to be something said about how much Michelle was pushing it, and up to this point was pushing suicide. And the question was just like, why would Michelle do this? So a lot of people do believe that maybe the change in medicine at the time of all this really had an issue with how she dealt with this situation. Her judgment and emotions were outrageous, like completely outrageous. So maybe she just couldn't handle it, but didn't know how to ask for help. On top of that, she was battling her own crippling mental illnesses. So Conrad constantly bringing up suicide, constantly bringing up his issues, and constantly telling her that he didn't think therapy would help. He didn't think any of this was helping him, and that he thought it was pretty much a crock of could be a breaking point for her. She was actively trying to get better, and he was actively trying to stay where he was at first. So Michelle was arrested, and there was a trial held. The argument was that Michelle completely manipulated Conrad into killing himself. She bullied him into it because she wanted the attention. She wanted to be the girl that's boyfriend killed herself. That way she could get sympathy from her friends and family. She needed a reason for people to be her friend, and what would be the best way than people feeling extremely bad for her and feeling like they couldn't turn her away at this moment. And a psychiatrist testified that her getting on Celexa could be a huge reason on why there was such a blurring of her judgment skills and ability to empathize. They also explained that these types of medications can alter a lot. They can alter the development of empathy, decision making, and emotional intelligence, especially if someone is young, a teenager, and their brain is still developing. It's hard on the brain to then take a medicine that is supposed to, Molly, change the way your brain works. I'm almost done, Bubby. I'm almost done. She waived her right to a jury and put her fate in the judge's hands solely. The thought process was that the judge would really look at it in more of a criminal law type of way instead of emotion like the jury would. And she was somewhat right. The verdict was bittersweet to watch. At first, it seemed like he was going to say she was innocent. So at the beginning of the verdict, it really seemed like she was going to be told she was innocent. But due to the fact that she told him to get back in that truck was cause of immense harm. She knew if he would get back in the truck, he would die. She knew it. And she also knew that she had been completely manipulative into him committing suicide. She knew he was having second thoughts, and that he probably, if it was his choice, wouldn't go back in there because he did not want to die that day. And so she was guilty of involuntary manslaughter, and she was sentenced to 15 months in jail and 5 years probation. I can see why she was held responsible for Conrad's death, and I believe she should be held responsible for Conrad's death because, I'm sorry, you don't persuade people to kill themselves. I don't care what you try to say the reasonings are. You don't convince people to kill themselves. You just don't. You don't mention it. You don't tell somebody to. You don't even joke about it. Don't. But with that being said, I can understand her frustration on her really working on getting better and going through treatments and trying to defeat this mental illnesses that she's had. And having someone who is constantly just choosing not to do that, wouldn't even pretend like it was a possibility for him to get better, and wouldn't even listen to her when she was trying to preach that he could be better if he seeked help. I can understand why that would be frustrating. I don't believe that you should just tell somebody to kill themselves if they're not listening to you. But I would understand if she had decided to break contact with Conrad. And I'm sorry, but you can just not excuse her behavior afterwards when she was doing nothing but trying to play a victim to his death. She did some really fucked up things there at the end. There's like just a lot of questions I have that show that her intent was just not great, and how she wanted to be seen as a way bigger part of Conrad's life than what she really was. I hope she has continued to seek therapy, because I do think her crippling mental illnesses caused her to act this way. This was all a perfect storm of events, and everything just kind of lined up for her to end up acting the way she did. And I'm sorry, I just don't ever think telling somebody to kill themselves, or persuading somebody to, not even just telling them, should ever in any type of situation be acceptable. And it's true. If he was having second thoughts about being in that truck and he escaped and he decided to leave the truck, and she's the one that convinced him to come back in, she does deserve jail time. And so with all that being said, I am going to link below the suicide prevention hotline. Never feel like you can't reach out. I promise you, there is always going to be someone who wants you to stay here and be on this earth. Always. Thank you guys so much for watching. Sorry this one was so heavy, as I say as a true crime YouTuber. I guess none of my cases are really light, but this one seemed extra heavy today. Just a reminder that this summer, more videos on the Unsolved in West Virginia series is coming out. So if you haven't already, go and rewatch that series, because I work really hard on those videos and I just love them so much. Please like and subscribe for me, and hit that notification button. That way you're notified the next time I upload. And please comment below any information maybe I didn't cover in this, because there was a lot. So I did have to cut some out, or just comment your thoughts. This one's just so controversial. What do you think? Do you think Michelle should be held completely responsible? Do you think that Conrad has any fault in this? All right, well, I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.